Hello, this is Tech Happy Life with Dr. Mike Brooks. Today's episode is Fortnite ruining your kid? So you might have heard me mention Fortnite in a few of the other episodes. You might be wondering to yourself, what is Forkknife? Or Fortnite is the actual name of it, and I said the same thing when I first heard the kids talking about it. So Fortnite is an action-adventure survival game that is cross-platform, so you can play it on multiple different platforms. It has a very social element, so team-based or squad-based play is encouraged. And it's cartoonish, so although there's violence and it's kind of a survival game and violence is involved, it's more about eliminating the other players rather than killing them. And there isn't the gratuitous or graphic violence that you see in other games like Call of Duty. It has over 125 million players, and it's really taken off in the past year. And the players come in all shapes and sizes and ages, but there is a very large contingent of players that are male and probably between the ages of like 8 to 10 years old and 20. Now, Fortnite is an engaging game for many reasons. I'm not going to use addictive because that's a really strong term, but it's very compelling and engaging for users for a number of reasons. So it's colorful, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of variability, so each game is different. There's a team-based element, so people can work as teams, and it encourages teamwork because that enhances your chances of survival and victory. And there's an element that's somewhat like the game Minecraft, which you might have heard of, where there is building and searching and acquiring resources. One of the elements of Fortnite that is particularly engaging, that keeps people coming back for more, is sometimes referred to as the Vegas effect, and that's a variable ratio reinforcement schedule. And so that is, every game is different, and so there are many times when players go through a game and they have a near victory, which is very reinforcing because it keeps them coming back for more, thinking, oh, I was so close that time, maybe next game will be the time when I achieve victory. Although Fortnite is the game of the hour or the game of 2018, if we go back to the inception of video games, they've always captured our imagination and attention from the get-go. So Space Invaders, you might be old enough to remember Pac-Man and Pac-Man Fever, the song, Pokemon, Tetris, Pokemon Go, all the Mario games, Call of Duty. So one game after another, they catch our attention, and then there'll be certain games that come along that a huge group of people flock to, and Fortnite is that game right now. Quick story of my own video game compulsion is, you might remember the game Dragon's Lair. It was a Laserdisc game. It was the first of its kind, and if you're a fan of Stranger Things, in season 2, Dustin was playing Dragon's Lair at the arcade. And that was me. I was about his age when it came out, and I was playing it at the local 7-Eleven. I was working at a pet store at the time, and all my paychecks went to play Dragon's Lair, and they were 50 cents a game back then, so translate that to today's money. It was quite expensive, but I didn't hesitate in putting all my money from my first job at the pet store into Dragon's Lair. I was so into it that during Hurricane Alicia in Houston, when I grew up in Houston, Hurricane Alicia hit. And during the eye of that hurricane, I took my 10-speed Schwinn bicycle without a helmet, rode 4 miles to the 7-Eleven to play, guess what, Dragon's Lair. So I'll be the last to blame kids playing Fortnite for getting way into the game when you look at my past. So there'll always be games to capture the imagination and attention. As to the question of, is Fortnite ruining your kid? My short answer to this is no, any more than Dragon's Lair ruined me as a young teen. In fact, I'll go on the record to say Fortnite offers many benefits to players. I'm going to name just a few. One, it's a lot of fun. That's why they're playing it to begin with. But it encourages teamwork and cooperation, because often it's the most fun when people are playing together in groups or teams. And then that fosters communication, problem solving, creativity because of the different ways to play to achieve victory. And one of the hidden benefits of this video game, as well as many others when you have a lot of people playing it, is that even when they are not playing it, players of all shapes, sizes, ethnicities, and backgrounds have a common language to communicate with one another, and they're sharing tips, strategies, and adventures they've had playing the game. Although Fortnite has so many benefits, as Shakespeare wrote in As You Like It, there can be too much of a good thing. The negatives of playing Fortnite are similar to the negatives that kick in from doing too much of about anything or any other video game. And this has to do with our physiological and psychological needs. Some things haven't changed in thousands of years, so our physiological and psychological needs are basically the same as they were 1,000 years ago or several thousand years ago. For instance, we still need about 8 hours of sleep. Teens need 9 to 10 hours of sleep, and that hasn't changed. So when teens or kids are playing Fortnite on school nights and not getting enough sleep because they're staying up late, that's where problems emerge, and there are going to be consequences. In addition to sleep loss, some other things can be pushed out by their gaming that start to take their toll. For instance, they're not getting enough physical activity. They're not exercising. They're just sitting playing the game. Maybe they're in-person interactions, so they're not hanging out with their friends or interacting with family members. It could be that all their other interests have dropped off. All their other hobbies like music or sports, they're dropping off the radar. Or perhaps they're not attending to their academics anymore and their grades are really slipping, and we know they're going to pay for that later on. So when these problems start to arise, you might remember the Tech Happy Life model that I presented earlier. When these problems are emerging, they're at the yellow light level. When they've spiraled completely out of control, they're at the red light level, and we want to prevent them from getting to that level. You might ask right now, how much is too much Fortnite? Now the science is of course still emerging on this, and it has a hard time keeping up with technology, but generally what the research shows is that about 2 to 3 hours of recreational screen time per day is the maximum amount that kids can get the benefits and not experience all the negatives. Beyond the 2 to 3 hours, what happens is the negatives of playing or being on the screen increase, and the positives are getting overshadowed by those negatives. So a tip for you as parents is try to keep your child's recreational screen time to 2 to 3 hours per day. That's their aggregate screen time. So if they're playing Fortnite 2 to 3 hours and they're on Snapchat for another hour and they're watching Netflix for another hour, you've got a problem. So their aggregate screen time of recreational screen time should be about 2 to 3 hours per day. During the school week, I'd say that should be more like an hour to 2 hours, and then on weekends you might allow for the 3 hours of recreational screen time. Ideally, you establish these parameters on the front end, and as you might recall, that's the green light level of the Tech Happy Life model. So you're trying to prevent these problems of overuse to begin with. This concludes this episode, Is Fortnite Ruining Your Kid? And we'll be covering Fortnite in some future episodes because it's such a rich and hot topic these days. This has been Tech Happy Life with Dr. Mike Brooks, and I look forward to seeing you again.